There's nothing harder than watching your child pretend not to notice when you're struggling. Jake Harmon knew that look in his 8-year-old daughter's eyes, the way Lila would quietly accept generic cereal instead of asking for her favorite brand, or how she'd offer to help with chores she was too small for. After his construction accident left him with a damaged shoulder and dwindling savings, keeping their small homestead running felt impossible. Then Scout, their German shepherd, started bringing home rocks from the woods. Every day, more rocks. Jake thought it was just dog behavior until he finally cleaned one off and saw something that didn't look like any ordinary stone. What he discovered would either save their little family or turn their quiet life upside down. But would this stroke of luck be the answer to their prayers, or would it bring troubles they never saw coming? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jake Harmon had built his life with his hands. For 15 years, those hands had shaped stone into beauty, carved headstones that honored the dead, crafted mantles that warmed living rooms, and restored century-old facades that gave buildings their dignity back. His calloused fingers could read granite like Braille, understanding its grain and stress points with an intimacy that came from true craftsmanship. The worn leather tool belt hanging on a nail in his workshop still held the weight of those years, each tool worn smooth by countless hours of honest work. That was before the scaffold collapsed on the Morrison Bank restoration project, before the surgery, before the physical therapy sessions that drained his savings faster than his hope, before the doctor's gentle but final verdict: Jake, your shoulder will never handle that kind of repetitive stress again. I'm sorry. Now, 18 months later, those same hands struggled to open pickle jars. The Harmon homestead sat on 12 acres outside Cedar Falls, Montana, a town that had seen better decades. Jake's grandfather had built the house in 1952 with timber from their own land, and 3 generations of Harmons had maintained it with the kind of stubborn pride that runs in a man's blood. The wraparound porch sagged a little these days, and the white paint had faded to the color of old bones, but it still stood solid against the mountain winds. Jake surveyed his domain from that same porch most mornings, coffee mug warming his palms as he planned another day of making do. The barn needed new shingles. The fence line drooped where deer had pushed through. The old Ford pickup made concerning noises that he couldn't afford to investigate. Everything seemed to be aging faster than he could keep up with, like time itself was working against him. "Morning, Daddy." Lila's voice carried the sleepy sweetness of childhood as she padded onto the porch in her oversized pajamas, dark hair sticking up in impossible directions. At 8 years old, she possessed the kind of resilience that children develop when life teaches them early that adults don't have all the answers. She'd learned to butter her own toast when Jake's shoulder seized up, learned to sort laundry by colors when he forgot which loads needed hot water, learned to be patient when grown-up worries made him quiet. "Morning, sweetheart." Jake lifted his good arm, and she nestled against his side like she belonged there, which she did. "Sleep okay?" Scout was dreaming again. His legs were running, but he was still lying down. She giggled, a sound that could make Jake believe everything might work out after all. "What do you think dogs dream about?" "Probably chasing rabbits or finding the perfect stick." Jake kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence. "Speaking of Scout, where is that furry troublemaker?" As if summoned by his name, Scout appeared from around the corner of the house, his German shepherd coat catching the morning light. At 6 years old, he moved with the purposeful gait of a dog who took his responsibilities seriously. Jake had rescued him from the pound 3 years ago, and Scout had repaid that kindness by becoming the family's self-appointed guardian, playmate, and emotional support system, all rolled into 100 pounds of loyalty. This morning, like many recent mornings, Scout carried something in his mouth. "Oh, for crying out loud," Jake muttered, as Scout trotted up the porch steps and deposited another muddy rock at their feet. "What is it with you and these damn rocks?" The behavior had started about a month ago. Every morning, Scout would disappear into the woods that bordered their property and return with stones, sometimes small ones, sometimes rocks the size of footballs. They accumulated in a growing pile beside the porch steps, like offerings to some canine deity Jake couldn't understand. Maybe he's building something, Lila suggested with 8-year-old logic, like a fort, or maybe he's collecting them for us. Dogs don't collect rocks, honey. They collect sticks and tennis balls and dead things that smell bad. Jake scratched Scout's ears, earning a tail wag that could power a small windmill. This one's just got a weird hobby. The truth was, Scout's rock collecting was the least of Jake's worries. The property taxes were due in 6 weeks, and he was exactly 3,000 short. The local hardware store had offered him some weekend work, but it involved lifting supplies that his shoulder couldn't handle. Mrs. Patterson needed her garden wall repaired, but stonework was exactly what the doctor had forbidden. Every solution led to the same dead end. Cedar Falls itself wasn't offering many alternatives. The town had been slowly dying since the lumber mill closed 8 years ago. Main Street looked like a smile with half its teeth missing. Empty storefronts. With soap-painted windows, the old movie theater boarded up. Even the post office had reduced its hours. Young people left for bigger cities as soon as they graduated, and those who stayed often wished they hadn't. Jake's late wife, Maria, used to say that Cedar Falls just needed someone to believe in it again. She'd had grand plans for community, gardens, art festivals, and ways to bring tourists up from Kalispell to see the mountains. Her journal, which Jake couldn't bring himself to read most days, was filled with sketches and dreams for breathing life back into their little town. Maria had been the dreamer. Jake had been the pragmatist. Together they'd balanced each other like a well-built foundation. Without her, Jake felt like he was trying to hold up a roof with one good arm. "Daddy, your coffee's getting cold," Lila observed, her small hand touching his wrist with the gentle concern that children show when they sense adult sadness. "You're right, kiddo. Come on, let's get some breakfast in you before school." The kitchen still smelled like Maria's cooking, even 2 years after the cancer took her. Jake had kept her spice rack exactly as she'd arranged it, though he rarely used anything more adventurous than salt and pepper these days. Leela had learned to make scrambled eggs, her specialty, while Jake handled the toast and orange juice. "Mrs. Henderson says there's going to be a career day at school next month," Lila mentioned between bites of eggs. "She wants parents to come. Talk about their jobs." Jake's stomach tightened. "That sounds interesting, sweetheart. I was thinking you could talk about building things. You know, about how you used to make those beautiful stones into walls and stuff." Her eyes lit up with the pride children have for their parents, regardless of current circumstances. "You could bring some of your tools." "We'll see, honey. Maybe someone else's parent has a more exciting job to talk about. But Daddy, you built the fountain in the town square, and the steps at the library, and that pretty wall around the cemetery." Lila's voice carried the certainty of absolute faith. "You make ugly rocks into beautiful things. That's like magic." Jake's throat tightened. Through a child's eyes, his former work did seem magical. Through an adult's eyes, it seemed like something that belonged to someone else's life. After Lila got the school bus, a yellow lifeline that connected their rural road to the wider world, Jake found himself staring at Scout's growing pile of rocks. The dog sat beside his collection like a curator in a very strange museum, tongue lolling out in what Jake swore looked like satisfaction. "What's your game here, boy?" Jake asked, crouching down, despite the protest from his shoulder. "You trying to build us a new house? Planning to go into the landscaping business?" Scout's tail wagged, but his attention remained fixed on the woods beyond the fence line, as if he was listening to something Jake couldn't hear. The nearest stones looked like nothing special. Ordinary creek rocks, maybe some granite chips from the old mining days, a few pieces of what might have been quartz. Nothing worth the daily expeditions Scout seemed compelled to make. Jake had grown up in these woods, knew every deer path and fishing hole. If there was anything valuable back there, 3 generations of Harmons would have found it by now. Still, the pile bothered him in a way he couldn't name. It felt purposeful, like Scout was trying to tell them something important and getting frustrated that his humans were too dense to understand. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air and bringing out the scent of pine and wildflowers. From the forest. This land had been in Jake's family for 70 years, and every season brought its own beauty. Spring meant wildflower meadows that took your breath away. Summer brought fishing streams that ran cold and clear. Fall painted the mountainside in colors that no artist could capture. Winter wrapped everything in silence, and snow so pure it hurt to look at. If he lost the property to unpaid taxes, some developer would probably subdivide it into vacation lots for rich folks from California. The thought made his chest tight with a grief that felt almost like losing Maria all over again. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Tom Brennan, his oldest friend, and one of the few people in town who still had steady work. "Beer tonight? Jenny's working late and I need to complain about something." "Sure. My place, 7 p.m., Jake texted back. Tom Brennan had been Jake's best man, Lila's unofficial uncle, and the kind of friend who showed up with groceries when pride prevented you from asking for help. He managed the regional power grid from an office in Kalispell, a job that required a 2-hour daily commute, but paid well enough to keep his family comfortable. Tom had offered to lend Jake money more than once, but Jake couldn't accept charity, even from friends who disguised it as loans they'd never expect to see repaid. As Jake puttered around the property, fixing what he could with one good arm and making lists of what needed professional attention, Scout continued his mysterious routine. The dog would disappear into the woods for 20 or 30 minutes, then return with another stone for his collection. By afternoon, he'd added 3 more rocks to the pile, including one that was almost perfectly round and larger than a bowling ball. "You're going to put your back out carrying rocks that size," Jake warned, but Scout just panted happily and trotted off for another expedition. When Lila returned from school, she approached Scout's collection with the scientific curiosity of a young naturalist. "They're all different," she announced after careful examination. "This one's grey with white spots. This one looks like it has crystals in it. And this big round one feels really heavy." She looked up at Jake with eyes that had inherited Maria's intelligence, along with her dark coloring. "Don't you think that's weird, Daddy? Why would Scout pick different kinds of rocks?" Jake had to admit it was strange. Most dogs with obsessive behaviors stuck to one type of object. Scout's collection looked like a geology lesson waiting to happen. "Maybe we should wash one off," Lila suggested. "You know, see what it really looks like under all that mud." The idea seemed harmless enough, and it would give them something to do together before Tom arrived. Jake selected one of the medium-sized stones from the pile, something manageable that wouldn't strain his shoulder if he had to handle it much. They set up a washing station on the back porch, using the old galvanized tub Maria had used for canning. Jake worked the garden hose, while Lila scrubbed with an old brush, both of them getting muddy in the process. Scout supervised from a safe distance, as if he knew something important was about to happen. As the layers of forest dirt washed away, the stone began to reveal itself. What had looked like ordinary creek rock under its coating of mud showed hints of something more interesting. Streaks of blue and green appeared, along with what looked like crystalline formations catching the afternoon light. "Daddy, look!" Lila's voice carried pure excitement. "It's pretty." Jake felt his breath catch. Even with his limited knowledge of geology, he could see that this was no ordinary rock. The patterns and colors suggested something that definitely didn't belong in a typical Montana creek bed. The surface showed bands of color that seemed almost too perfect to be natural, and there were formations that looked like they might actually be valuable minerals. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered, then caught himself. Well, that's interesting." Lila giggled at his slip. "You said a bad word. Sometimes grown-ups say bad words when they're surprised," Jake explained, still staring at the stone in his hands. "And this definitely qualifies as surprising. For the first time in months, Jake felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. Maybe Scout wasn't just collecting rocks after all. Maybe, just maybe, their loyal dog had found something that could change everything. The cleaned stone sat on the porch table like a question mark made of mineral and light. Jake found himself staring at it while Lila did her homework inside, drawn to patterns that seemed to shift depending on the angle of the late afternoon sun. The blue-green bands weren't just pretty. They had a depth and complexity that spoke of geological processes far beyond his understanding. Tom Brennan arrived at 7 sharp, carrying a six-pack and wearing the expression of a man who'd spent 2 hours thinking about whatever was bothering him during his drive home. "You look like hell," Tom announced cheerfully, then stopped short when he saw the stone. "What in the world is that?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out." Jake handed his friend a beer and settled into his usual porch chair, the one with the loose armrest that he kept meaning to fix. Scout brought it home, along with about 40 others. Tom picked up the stone, turning it in his hands like a jeweler examining a suspicious diamond. His engineering background had given him a practical appreciation for materials and their properties. "Jake, this doesn't look like anything I've seen around here. Where exactly did Scout find it?" "Somewhere back in the woods. He's been making daily trips for weeks now, always comes back with rocks." Jake gestured toward the pile that had grown throughout the day. "I finally got curious enough to clean one off. This has weight to it. Real weight. And these formations..." Tom held the stone up to catch the porch light. "I'm no geologist, but this looks like it might be worth having someone take a look at." The thought had been nagging at Jake all afternoon, but hearing it from Tom made it feel more real and somehow more frightening. Hope was a dangerous thing when you'd been disappointed as many times as Jake had been over the past 2 years. "You think I should take it to someone?" "Like who?" "There's a geology professor at the university in Missoula, Dr. Sarah Chen. I met her at a conference a couple years ago. She was consulting on mineral content for some of our transmission line projects." Tom pulled out his phone. "Smart lady. If anyone could tell you what you've got here, it'd be her." Jake accepted the phone number Tom typed into his contacts, but part of him wondered if he was setting himself up for embarrassment. Showing up at a university with rocks his dog had collected seemed like the kind of thing that would make a man look foolish. What if it's nothing special? What if Scout just has expensive taste in ordinary rocks? Tom grinned. "Then you're out the cost of a phone call and you know for sure. But what if it's something? What if Scout's been trying to tell you something important and you're too stubborn to listen?" That evening, after Tom had gone home and Lila was asleep, Jake sat on the porch with Scout and considered the implications. The dog seemed to understand that his daily offerings were finally receiving proper attention. He sat alertly beside his collection, ears pricked forward like he was waiting for Jake to catch up to some obvious conclusion. "You've been trying to tell us something, haven't you, boy?" Jake scratched Scout's ears, earning a contented rumble. "All right, let's see what other treasures you've been hoarding." The next morning, Jake convinced Lila to help him wash several more stones before school. Each one revealed its own character as the forest dirt washed away. Some showed metallic veins that caught the light. Others displayed crystal formations that looked like they belonged in a museum display case. None of them looked like typical Montana Creek rock. "Daddy, these are like Easter eggs," Lila observed as she scrubbed. "You don't know what colors are hiding inside until you clean them up." Her innocent observation hit Jake with unexpected force. How many other things in his life had he dismissed without looking closer? How many opportunities had he missed because the surface appearance didn't promise anything special? After Lila caught the school bus, Jake spent an hour gathering courage before dialing Dr. Chen's number. Academic types made him nervous. All that education made his high school diploma feel inadequate, but Tom's confidence in the professor's expertise had been convincing. "Dr. Chen's office, this is Miranda." Hello, this is Jake Harmon. I'm calling from Cedar Falls, and I have some rocks that my dog found. Tom Brennan suggested I call Dr. Chen about them." There was a pause. "Rocks that your dog found?" Jake felt heat creep up his neck. I know how that sounds, but these aren't ordinary rocks, and Tom thought maybe Dr. Chen could tell me what they are. Hold on, let me check her schedule. Another pause, during which Jake considered hanging up and forgetting the whole thing. Dr. Chen has some field work in your area next week. She could stop by Thursday afternoon if that works for you. And come here, to my house. Dr. Chen prefers to see geological samples in their natural context when possible, and Tom Brennan's recommendations carry weight with her. Should I put you down for Thursday at 2 p.m.? Jake gave his address and directions, then spent the rest of the week alternating between excitement and dread. He cleaned his house, organized Scout's rock collection into something resembling a display, and tried to prepare himself for the possibility that a geology professor would politely tell him his dog had expensive taste in worthless stones. Thursday morning brought Scout's most impressive find yet, a stone the size of a cantaloupe with bands of color that seemed to glow from within. Jake could barely lift it with his good arm, and he wondered how Scout had managed to drag it out of the woods. "You're really going all out for the professor's visit, aren't you?" Jake asked the dog, who sat proudly beside his latest offering. "Doctor." Sarah Chen arrived in a dusty jeep loaded with scientific equipment, looking younger than Jake had expected and more approachable than he'd feared. She was Asian American, probably in her early 40s, with shoulder-length black hair and the kind of practical clothing that suggested she spent more time in the field than behind a desk. "Mr. Harmon, I'm Sarah Chen." Her handshake was firm and confident. "Tom Brennan told me you have some interesting specimens." "I hope I'm not wasting your time, Dr. Chen. I don't know much about rocks, but these seemed unusual. Please call me Sarah, and you're definitely not wasting my time. Tom's geological instincts are better than most professionals I know." She looked at Scout, who was sitting at attention, like he was presenting his collection for inspection. "So this is the prospector?" "That's Scout. He's been bringing these home for about a month now. I finally got curious enough to clean a few off and see what was underneath all the mud." Sarah approached the collection with the focused attention of someone who knew what to look for. She picked up several stones, examining them in the afternoon light, and Jake watched her expression change from professional interest to genuine surprise. "Mr. Harmon, Jake, where exactly did Scout find these?" "Somewhere back in those woods. He disappears for 20 or 30 minutes and comes back with another rock, always from the same general direction." Sarah opened her field kit and pulled out a hand lens, studying several specimens more closely. "These appear to be naturally formed concretions with some very unusual mineral content. The banding patterns and crystal formations suggest they've been formed under specific geological conditions that are quite rare." Jake's mouth went dry. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means Scout may have found something significant. These formations, particularly this larger specimen, show characteristics I associate with high-value mineral deposits. I'd need to do some field testing to be certain, but this could be very important." She looked up at Jake with the kind of intensity that made it clear she wasn't just being polite. "Would you be willing to let Scout show me where he's been finding these?" 20 minutes later, Jake found himself following a geology professor and his dog into the woods behind his house, carrying Sarah's field equipment and trying to manage his expectations. Scout led them confidently along what appeared to be a game trail, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where he was going. "He's following water," Sarah observed, noting the way the path paralleled a seasonal creek. Geological formations like these are often associated with specific water table conditions. They walked for 15 minutes before Scout stopped at what looked like an unremarkable hillside covered in pine needles and fallen leaves. The dog sat down and looked back at them with an expression that clearly said, "Here, this is what I've been trying to show you." Sarah began clearing away the forest debris, revealing patches of exposed rock that even Jake could see looked different from the surrounding geology. She pulled out instruments that beeped and clicked, taking measurements and photographs with scientific precision. "Jake, I need you to understand. that I'm going to have to run extensive tests to be certain, but what I'm seeing here suggests Scout has found the source of a significant mineral deposit. She looked at him with the kind of seriousness that made the forest seem suddenly quiet. We're talking about formations that could have substantial commercial value. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. After 2 years of struggle, of watching every dollar and measuring every possibility, the idea that Scout might have literally unearthed their salvation seemed too incredible to accept. "How substantial?" he managed to ask. Sarah stood up, brushing pine needles from her knees. "I can't give you numbers without proper analysis, but based on what I'm seeing, we could be talking about millions of dollars worth of mineral rights. Possibly much more." Jake sat down hard on a fallen log, his legs suddenly unreliable. Scout trotted over and placed his head on Jake's knee, tail wagging slowly as if he understood that he'd finally gotten his message across. The woods around them seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The drive back to the house passed in a blur of possibility and disbelief. Sarah's field kit rattled in the back of her Jeep, filled with samples that might represent the difference between Jake losing his family's land and securing Lila's future beyond his wildest dreams. "I want to be very clear about what happens next," Sarah said as they parked beside the house. "I'll need to run these samples through a full spectral analysis, which will take about a week. I'll also need to research the geological history of this area and check mineral rights databases. Nothing is certain until we have hard data." Jake nodded, though his mind was spinning too fast to fully process the scientific caution. "What should I do in the meantime? Don't tell anyone about this yet. If word gets out before we understand what we're dealing with, you could have problems you're not prepared for." Sarah's expression grew serious. "Mining companies have been known to pressure landowners into unfavorable deals when they smell opportunity. You want to know exactly what you have before anyone else starts sniffing around." That evening, Jake found it nearly impossible to act normal around Lila. She chatted about her school day over dinner, describing an art project about Montana, wildlife, while Jake struggled to focus on anything beyond the possibility that their entire world might be about to change. "Daddy, you're being weird," Lila announced with 8-year-old directness. "You keep looking at Scout like he did something amazing." "Maybe he did," Jake said carefully. "Dr. Chen thinks his rock collection might be more interesting than we." I thought, "Really, like treasure interesting?" Jake's heart clenched at the hope in her voice. "We don't know yet, sweetheart. Dr. Chen has to run some tests, but maybe." That night, after Lila was asleep, Jake sat on the porch staring at Scout's collection with new eyes. Each stone represented a trip into the woods, a purposeful mission that none of them had understood. How long had Scout known something was back there? Had the dog somehow sensed geological formations that human eyes couldn't detect? "You've been trying to take care of us, haven't you, boy?" Jake whispered. Scout's tail thumped against the porch boards, his dark eyes reflecting the porch light with an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. The week crawled by like a wounded animal. Jake threw himself into property maintenance, trying to stay busy while his mind churned through scenarios that ranged from modest good fortune to life-changing wealth. He fixed the sagging gate, patched holes in the barn roof, and organized his workshop with nervous energy that Lila noticed but didn't. Comment on. Tom Brennan stopped by Wednesday evening, ostensibly to borrow a socket wrench, but really to check on his friend's state of mind. "You look like a man waiting for test results," Tom observed, settling into his usual porch chair. "That's exactly what I am." Jake cracked open a beer, his first drink since Sarah's visit. "She said it could be significant, Tom. Like, really significant. And you're scared it's too good to be true, aren't you? I mean, think about it. My dog finds a fortune in rocks right when I'm about to lose the farm. That's the kind of thing that happens in fairy tales, not to guys like me." Tom was quiet for a long moment, watching Scout patrol the perimeter of his rock collection. "You know what I think? I think maybe you've had so much bad luck lately that you've forgotten good luck is allowed to happen too. Maria getting sick wasn't your fault. The accident wasn't your fault. Maybe this isn't random chance. Maybe it's just your turn for something. Good. Thursday morning brought Dr. Sarah Chen's call at exactly 9 a.m. Jake, I need to come out there today. Can you make sure you're available around noon? Her tone was different, more urgent, less cautiously scientific. Did you find something? I found several somethings. We need to talk in person. Jake spent the morning pacing the house, checking the clock every few minutes, and trying not to let Lila see how anxious he was. When Sarah's Jeep pulled into the driveway, he was waiting on the porch, like Scout waiting for his dinner. Jake, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, Sarah began without preamble, but I've run the tests 3 times, consulted with colleagues, and checked historical geological surveys. Your property sits on top of what appears to be a significant deposit of rare earth mineral concretions. Jake's knees went weak. What does that mean in dollars? The formations Scout found contain elements used in advanced technology manufacturing, components for smartphones, electric car batteries, renewable energy systems. The market demand for these materials has exploded over the past 5 years. Sarah pulled out a folder thick with charts and analysis reports. Based on my preliminary assessment, we're looking at a deposit potentially worth between $50 and $200 million. The numbers hit Jake like a physical blow. He sat down hard on the porch steps, his good hand gripping the railing. For stability. That can't be right. I've verified it through multiple sources. Your dog has literally led you to one of the most significant mineral discoveries in Montana in the past decade. Sarah sat down beside him, her voice gentle but certain. Jake, this changes everything. Scout appeared from around the corner of the house, carrying yet another stone in his mouth. He deposited it carefully with the rest of his collection and looked at Jake with an expression that seemed to say, I told you so. There's more, Sarah continued. I've been researching the geological history of this area, and there are records of mineral surveys from the 1970s that identified anomalous formations in this region. Someone knew there was something here, but the technology to extract it profitably didn't exist then. Jake's mind reeled. So this has been here all along? For millions of years, probably, but Scout somehow found the surface expressions that led us to the main deposit. Dogs have senses we don't fully understand. Maybe he could smell mineral traces or detect electromagnetic signatures from the formations. However he did it, he led us straight to it. The implications began cascading through Jake's consciousness. Financial security for Lila, the ability to save the family property, resources to honor Maria's dreams for the community, the end of sleepless nights worrying about property taxes and medical bills, but also scrutiny from mining companies, pressure from people who would want a piece of the discovery, changes to their quiet life that might not all be welcome. What do I do now? Jake asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by possibilities he'd never imagined having to consider. First, you need legal representation. This kind of discovery attracts attention from major corporations, and you want to be prepared. Second, you need to understand your mineral rights. Make sure you actually own what Scout found. Third, you need to decide what kind of development you want to allow on your land. Sarah handed him a business card. This lawyer specializes in mineral rights and mining law. She's honest, she's tough, and she doesn't let corporations push small landowners around. Call her today. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused beside her Jeep. Jake, I want you to know that discoveries like this can change lives in ways that go far beyond money. You're about to become a very interesting person to a lot of people. Some of them will have your best interests at heart. Others won't. After she drove away, Jake sat on his porch staring at Scout's rock collection, now revealed as the evidence of the most important discovery of his life. The dog sat beside him, panting contentedly, his mission finally understood and appreciated. When Lila got home from school that afternoon, Jake was still sitting in the same spot, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Daddy, you look funny. Did Dr. Chen call about the rocks? She did, sweetheart. It turns out Scout found something very special. I knew it. Lila threw her arms around Scout's neck. You're the smartest dog ever. What did he find, Daddy? Jake looked at his daughter's expectant face, her mother's eyes bright with curiosity and trust, and realized that his answer would be the moment their old life ended and something entirely new began. He found our future, honey. Scout found our future. The business card Sarah had given him felt heavier than it should have as Jake dialed the number Friday morning. Patricia Reeves, attorney at law, specialized in mineral rights and mining contracts, expertise Jake had never imagined needing. Ms. Reeves, this is Jake Harmon. Dr. Sarah Chen from the university gave me your number. She said I might need legal advice about a mineral discovery on my property. Mr. Harmon, Sarah told me to expect your call. Can you come to my office in Kalispell this afternoon? We need to discuss your situation before word gets out about what you've found. The drive to Kalispell gave Jake time to think about how dramatically his life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday morning, his biggest worry had been the property tax bill. Today, he was consulting lawyers about mineral rights worth more money than he could properly comprehend. Patricia Reeves was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every trick mining companies used to separate landowners from their resources. Her office was lined with legal texts and photographs of Montana landscapes, creating an atmosphere of competent professionalism that Jake found reassuring. Before we discuss your discovery, I need to verify your mineral rights, she began, spreading documents across her desk. In Montana, surface ownership doesn't always include subsurface mineral rights. Previous landowners sometimes sold those rights separately. Jake's stomach dropped. What if I don't own the mineral rights? Then someone else gets very wealthy from what your dog found. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact. But let's check the records before we panic. An hour of document review revealed that Jake's grandfather had been careful to retain all mineral rights when he purchased the property in 1952. 3 generations of Harmons had owned not just the surface land, but everything beneath it. You're lucky, Patricia said. Your grandfather was smarter than most people realize they need to be. The mineral rights are yours, free and clear. Relief flooded through Jake like warm water. So, what happens now? Now you prepare for a siege. Word will get out about your discovery. These things always leak. Mining companies will start calling, making offers, applying pressure. Some will be legitimate businesses proposing fair partnerships. Others will try to take advantage of your inexperience. She pulled out a manila folder thick with contracts and correspondence. I've seen companies offer landowners 10% of market value for mineral rights, claiming it's generous because of extraction costs and market risks. I've also seen them use intimidation tactics against people who don't have proper legal representation. Jake thought about his conversation with Sarah, her warning about pressure from corporations. What kind of intimidation? Lawsuits claiming defects in your property title, offers to buy your surface land for fair market value that don't mention the minerals underneath. Pressure from local officials who've been influenced by promises of tax revenue from mining operations. Patricia's expression was grim. These companies have resources and experience you don't have. That's why you need someone like me. The first call came that evening while Jake was helping Lila with her math homework. The caller identified himself as Robert Steele from Titan Mining Corporation, speaking in the smooth tones of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Mr. Harmon, I understand congratulations are in order. Word is, you've made quite a discovery on your property. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Sarah had warned him about leaks, but he hadn't expected them to happen so quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Now there's no need to be coy. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for your mineral rights, something that could set you and your daughter up for life without the headaches of development and extraction. I'm not interested in selling anything, Jake said firmly. Don't. Make any hasty decisions, Mr. Harmon. We're talking about a 7-figure payment, immediate cash, no risk to you. Sometimes the smart play is to take the certain money instead of gambling on variables you can't control. After Jake hung up, his hands were shaking slightly. The caller's friendly persistence had carried an undertone that felt more like threat than opportunity. The calls multiplied over the weekend. Representatives from mining companies Jake had never heard of, each claiming to offer the best possible deal, each suggesting that delaying could result in complications he'd rather avoid. By Sunday evening, Jake had stopped answering his phone. "Daddy, why do so many people keep calling?" Lila asked as the phone rang for the 8th time during dinner. "Because Scout found something that a lot of people want," Jake explained. "But just because they want it doesn't mean we have to give it to them." Monday brought a visit from Titan Mining's local representative, the same Robert Steele who had called Friday evening. He arrived in a black SUV that looked out of place, on the rural road, accompanied by a woman in a business suit who carried a briefcase and wore the expression of someone accustomed to closing deals. "Mr. Harmon, I'm Robert Steele. I believe we spoke on the phone. This is Janet Morrison, our contract specialist. We were hoping we could discuss our proposal in person." Jake met them on his front porch, with Scout standing alert beside him. The dog's instinctive wariness of strangers seemed particularly acute around these visitors. "I told you on the phone I'm not interested in selling." "Of course, and we respect that," Steele said smoothly. "But we'd like to present some information that might change your perspective. The mining business involves significant risks and regulatory complexities that can be overwhelming for individual landowners." Janet Morrison opened her briefcase and produced a contract folder. "We're prepared to offer you $12 million for complete mineral rights to your property, with payment in full within 30 days of signing. No risk, no ongoing obligations, no regulatory headaches." The number hit Jake like a physical blow. $12 million. More money than his family had made in 3 generations of honest work. Enough to secure Lila's future, pay for the best colleges, provide for grandchildren he might never live to see. But Patricia Reeves had warned him about lowball offers disguised as generosity. "I'll need to consult with my attorney," Jake said. Steele's smile became slightly less warm. "Attorneys have a way of complicating simple decisions, Mr. Harmon. Sometimes the smart move is to accept a generous offer before market conditions change." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Steele?" "Not at all. I'm simply pointing out that mineral markets can be volatile and regulatory approval for extraction can be uncertain. A guaranteed payout eliminates those risks." After they left, Jake called Patricia immediately. Her reaction to Titan's offer was swift and decisive. $12 million is insulting," she said bluntly. "Based on Sarah's preliminary assessment, you're looking at mineral rights worth 20 times that amount. They're betting you don't know what you have. But $12 million is still more money than I can imagine having. Jake, this is exactly how mining companies acquire valuable resources. For pennies on the dollar. They find people who are struggling financially and offer them what seems like life-changing money, knowing it's a fraction of the true value." That evening, Tom Brennan stopped by to check on his friend, bringing beer and the kind of practical wisdom that came from 30 years of dealing with corporate manipulation in his own work. "They're not offering you $12 million out of the kindness of their hearts," Tom pointed out. "They're offering $12 million because they know they can make $100 million from what Scout found." Jake sat on his porch, looking at the rock pile that had started everything, trying to process the magnitude of decisions he'd never expected to face. What if I'm being greedy? What if $12 million is enough and I'm risking it all by being stubborn? "You're not being greedy by wanting fair value for your own property," Tom replied. "You're being responsible to Lila, to your family's legacy, to yourself." Scout appeared from his evening patrol, carrying another stone to add to his collection. The dog's continued dedication to his mysterious mission seemed almost surreal now that they understood its significance. "You really did find us a treasure, didn't you, boy?" Jake said, scratching Scout's ears. "Now we just have to figure out how to keep the pirates from stealing it." The phone rang again as they sat talking. Jake let it go to voicemail, along with the dozens of other calls from mining companies, reporters, and people claiming to be distant relatives with opinions about mineral rights. His quiet life was officially over. The question now was, what kind of life would take its place? By Wednesday, Jake had disconnected his landline and turned off his cell phone, except for emergencies. The constant calls from mining companies, reporters, and supposed long-lost relatives had made normal life impossible. Lila couldn't do homework without interruption, and Scout had become increasingly agitated by the steady stream of strangers appearing at their property. The discovery that changed everything came when Jake was searching through Maria's belongings for their property deed. Patricia Reeves had requested all original documentation, and Jake knew Maria had kept important papers in her cedar chest upstairs. The journal fell out from between insurance policies and birth certificates, a leather-bound book he'd seen Maria writing in during the last year of her life, but had never been able to bring himself to read. Her handwriting filled the pages with thoughts, observations, and dreams that felt too intimate to intrude upon, even 2 years after her death. But today, a particular passage caught his eye. Jake thinks I don't know about the old geological survey, but I found the report when I was researching grant applications for the community center. The minerals are there, just like Grandpa suspected. Someday, when the technology catches up, this land could provide for Cedar Falls in ways we've never imagined. I hope whoever inherits this responsibility uses it to bring our town back to life, not just for profit. Jake's hands trembled as he read further. Maria had known. Somehow, she had discovered the mineral potential of their property and kept it secret, waiting for the right time or the right circumstances to act on the knowledge. He found more references scattered throughout. Her journal entries, mentions of sustainable extraction methods she'd researched, notes about environmental protection measures, and detailed plans for using mineral revenue to fund community development projects. The most stunning discovery came near the end of the journal, in an entry dated just 3 months before her cancer diagnosis. I've been training Scout to recognize the scent markers of mineral formations. It sounds crazy, but dogs have been used for geological prospecting before. If something happens to me, maybe he can show Jake what I never had the chance to tell him. The land will provide when the time is right. Jake sat on their bedroom floor, surrounded by Maria's papers and memories, finally understanding that Scout's rock-collecting behavior wasn't mysterious at all. It was purposeful, trained, and directed by a woman who had loved her family enough to prepare for possibilities she might not live to see. The phone rang downstairs, the emergency line he'd kept active, and Jake heard Lila answer it with the cautious politeness he'd taught her for dealing with strangers. "Daddy, it's Dr. Chen. She says it's important." Sarah's voice carried urgent concern when Jake took the call. "Jake, we have a problem. Titan Mining has filed preliminary claims on mineral rights for the entire Cedar Creek watershed. They're trying to establish legal precedent for extraction rights, even if they can't buy your property. Can they do that? They can try. It's a legal maneuver designed to pressure you into selling by making independent development more complicated. They're betting you don't have the resources to fight a prolonged legal battle." Jake felt the familiar weight of impossibility settling on his shoulders, the same feeling he'd carried for 2 years, watching problems multiply faster than solutions. "So what are my options?" "Fight them, but you'll need more than Patricia Reeves. You'll need environmental lawyers, mining engineers, and probably a public relations firm to handle media pressure." Sarah paused. "Jake, they're playing hardball because they know how valuable your discovery is. Don't let them intimidate you into accepting pennies on the dollar." That evening, Jake called a family meeting, something Maria used to do when important decisions needed discussion. He and Lila sat at their kitchen table, Scout lying at their feet, while Jake tried to explain the situation in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "Sweetheart, some companies want to buy the minerals Scout found, but they're not offering fair prices. They're also trying to make it harder for us to work with other people who might be more honest." Lila considered this with the seriousness she brought to important matters. "Is that why so many people keep calling and driving up to our house?" "Yes. And it's why we might need to make some changes in how we live for a while." "What kind of changes?" Jake had been dreading this conversation, but Maria's journal had clarified something important about their responsibilities. "We might need to fight to protect what Scout found. That means lawyers and meetings, and people asking us lots of questions. But it also means we could use the minerals to help other people, not just ourselves." He showed Lila some of the pages. From Maria's journal, reading aloud her dreams for community development and environmental protection. "Your mother wanted to use anything valuable on our land to make Cedar Falls a better place for everyone to live." Lila's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like building the community center she always talked about?" "Exactly like that. But first, we have to make sure the right people get to make those decisions, not the companies that just want to make money." The next morning brought Tom Brennan with coffee, pastries, and the local newspaper. The Cedar Falls Gazette had run a front-page story about the mineral discovery, complete with speculation about economic impact and interviews with residents excited about potential jobs. "You're famous," Tom announced, spreading the paper on Jake's kitchen table, though they spelled Scout's name wrong in the photo caption. The article painted a generally positive picture of the discovery, but Jake noticed quotes from Titan Mining, representatives emphasizing the complexity of mineral extraction and the risks faced by inexperienced developers. The message was clear: sell to the professionals or face problems you can't handle. "There's something else," Tom said, his expression growing serious. "I heard from my buddy who works at the county planning office. Titan has been asking questions about your property taxes, building permits, anything they might use to create legal complications." Jake felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. What kind of complications? The kind that cost money and time to resolve, even when you're in the right. They're looking for pressure points, ways to make keeping the property more expensive than selling it. That afternoon brought Jake's first taste of media attention when a reporter from the Kalispell paper arrived with a photographer asking for interviews about the miracle dog who found buried treasure. Jake politely declined, but the reporter spent an hour talking to neighbors and taking photographs of the property from the road. The story that appeared the next day focused heavily on Jake's financial struggles and Lila's needs as a single father, painting a picture of a man who should be grateful for any offer that could improve his daughter's circumstances. The implicit message was clear: refusing generous offers from mining companies was either greedy or foolish. Patricia Reeves called that evening with updates on Titan's legal maneuvering and advice that made Jake's head spin with complexity. They're filing environmental impact assessments that could tie up development for years, then positioning themselves as the solution to regulatory delays they're creating, she explained. It's a common tactic: manufacture problems, then offer to solve them for a price. "How much is this going to cost me to fight?" "More than you can afford without help. But Jake, there are options. Environmental groups might support your case if you commit to sustainable extraction methods. Community development organizations could provide resources if you pledge mineral revenue to local projects." Jake thought about Maria's journal, her vision of using the land's resources to revitalize Cedar Falls. What if we made this bigger than just my family's financial security? What if we turned it into something that could help the whole community? "That's exactly the kind of thinking that attracts the right kind of support," Patricia said. "But it also makes you a bigger target for companies that prefer to deal with isolated landowners who can be pressured into quick sales." That night, Jake sat on his porch with Maria's journal, reading her dreams by the light of a full moon. Scout lay beside him, occasionally lifting his head to monitor the darkness beyond their property line. The dog's protective instincts had intensified since the discovery, as if he understood that his find had made their family valuable and therefore vulnerable. She knew this day would come, didn't she, boy? Jake whispered, scratching Scout's ears. She prepared both of us for something she might not be here to see. The journal entry that struck him most deeply was one of Maria's last. The land has been waiting for the right moment, the right technology, the right person to unlock its potential responsibly. I think that person might be Jake, even though he doesn't see it yet. He has the integrity to do this right, and Scout will help him find the way when the time comes. Cedar Falls needs someone who understands that true wealth isn't just about money. It's about building something lasting. For the people you love. Jake closed the journal and looked out at the woods where Scout had made his life-changing discoveries. Tomorrow would bring more pressure, more offers, more complications. But tonight, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Maria's death. A sense of purpose that extended beyond mere survival. His late wife had left him more than memories and dreams. She had left him a mission, a trained dog, and the knowledge he needed to honor both her vision and their daughter's future. The question was whether he had the strength to see it through. The pressure escalated over the following week in ways Jake hadn't anticipated. Titan Mining's tactics shifted from generous offers to subtle intimidation. Surveyors appeared on adjacent properties, claiming to conduct routine geological assessments, and county officials began asking questions about Jake's compliance with various land use regulations. The breaking point came when Lila's school called to report that strangers had been asking teachers and students questions about the Harmon family's sudden wealth, and whether Jake was making responsible decisions about his daughter's future. Mr. Harmon, we've had 3 different people claiming to be journalists asking about Lila's well-being and your financial situation, the principal explained when Jake arrived at the school. We didn't provide any information, but we thought you should know. Jake felt something cold and protective settle in his chest. Putting pressure on him was one thing, but involving Lila crossed a line that transformed his caution into determination. That afternoon, he made 2 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Dr. Sarah Chen. Sarah, I need to understand something. Could the minerals Scout found actually be developed in a way that benefits the community instead of just making mining companies rich? Absolutely. There are models for community-controlled mineral extraction that provide local jobs, environmental protection, and revenue sharing. It requires more planning and oversight than corporate extraction, but the long-term benefits are significantly better for everyone involved. The second call was to Tom Brennan. Tom, remember all those dreams Maria had about revitalizing Cedar Falls? What if we could actually make them happen? What are you thinking, Jake? I'm thinking it's time to stop reacting to what other people want and start pursuing what Maria envisioned. But I'm going to need help. Tom's response was immediate. Whatever you need. That evening, Jake did something he hadn't done since Maria's funeral. He reached out to his community. He called neighbors, local business owners, and longtime residents, inviting them to a meeting at his house Saturday morning to discuss possibilities that could benefit everyone. The response surprised him. 12 people showed up, including Mayor Barbara Chen, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen, retired teacher Margaret Foster, and several other community leaders Jake had known all his life, but rarely spoke to since becoming absorbed in his own struggles. Folks, I want to be straight with you, Jake began, standing on his porch while his neighbors sat in chairs borrowed from the church. Scout found something valuable on our property, and mining companies are pressing hard to buy it cheap. But my late wife left plans for using any resources this land might provide to help rebuild Cedar Falls, not just make my family wealthy. He pulled out Maria's journal and shared her vision. Sustainable extraction methods that would provide local jobs, environmental protection measures that would preserve the natural beauty that drew people to the area, and revenue sharing that Good fund community projects the town had dreamed about for years. Margaret Foster spoke first. Maria always was, thinking 10 steps ahead of the rest of us. What kind of help do you need to make this happen, instead of just selling out to the corporations? Legal support, mostly, and community backing to show that this isn't just one man's fantasy, that there are people who want to see Cedar Falls thrive again. Mayor Chen leaned forward. Jake, if you're serious about community development, the town council would support a proposal that keeps extraction profits local. We've been hemorrhaging young people for years because there are no opportunities here. By the end of the meeting, Jake had commitments from 12 community leaders to support his vision publicly and help recruit additional backers. More importantly, he had Margaret Foster's offer to research grant opportunities for sustainable development projects, and Mayor Chen's promise to navigate municipal regulations. There's something else, Tom added, as the group prepared to leave. My company has been looking for partners in renewable energy projects. If you develop this right, the mineral extraction could fund solar and wind installations that would make Cedar Falls energy independent. That Sunday, Jake found himself in an unexpected place, the Cedar Falls Community Church, attending service for the first time since Maria's funeral. He'd come partly for the community connection his project would need, but mostly because he felt Maria's presence so strongly in her journal that he wanted to be somewhere she had loved. Reverend Williams welcomed him warmly after the service. Jake, I've been hearing about your discovery and your plans. Maria would be proud of the way you're thinking about using this blessing. I hope so, Reverend. I'm trying to honor what she wanted, but it's complicated. The best things usually are, but you know, this congregation includes teachers, engineers, retired business owners, and people with all kinds of skills. If you need help making Maria's vision reality, you've got more support than you realize. Monday morning brought a surprise visitor. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived with a folder of documents and an expression of professional excitement that Jake had learned to recognize as significant. Jake, I've been researching community-controlled mineral extraction models, and I found something perfect for your situation. She spread blueprints and financial projections across his kitchen table. There's a cooperative in Colorado that developed a sustainable extraction method for rare earth minerals. They're willing to consult on a similar project here. The Colorado model involved local ownership of extraction equipment, environmental monitoring by independent scientists, and profit sharing that kept 70% of revenue in the community. Corporate partners provided technical expertise and market access in exchange for management fees, but local control remained absolute. How much would something like this cost to set up? Jake asked. About $12 million in initial investment, Sarah replied. Exactly what Titan Mining offered you for complete mineral rights. Jake stared at the numbers, understanding dawning like sunrise. Instead of selling his mineral rights for $12 million, he could invest that amount in equipment and infrastructure. That would generate far more revenue over time, while providing jobs and community benefits that corporate extraction never would. But there's a catch, Sarah continued. You'd need community investment and support to make it work. This isn't something you can do alone. That evening, Jake called Patricia Reeves with a proposal that made his lawyer pause for a long moment. You want to reject Titan's offer and instead organize community-controlled mineral extraction. Patricia's tone suggested she was recalibrating her assessment of her client. Jake, that's ambitious to the point of being audacious. Is it legal? Completely legal. And if you can pull it off, it would be brilliant. But you're talking about organizing dozens of people, raising significant capital, and taking on regulatory challenges that would intimidate experienced developers. My wife believed it was possible. My community is willing to support it. And, frankly, I'd rather fail trying to do something meaningful than succeed by selling out to people who only care about profit. Patricia was quiet for a moment. All right, Jake. If you're serious about this, I'll help you structure it properly. But understand, once word gets out that you're rejecting corporate buyout offers in favor of community development, the pressure is going to intensify significantly. That night, as Jake sat on his porch reading more of Maria's journal by lamplight, Scout brought him one more stone, a piece of mineral formation so beautiful it seemed to glow with inner light. One more. Vote of confidence, boy? Jake asked, turning the stone over in his hands. Maria knew this day would come, didn't she? She knew you'd lead me to exactly what the community needed, exactly when we needed it. Scout's tail wagged slowly, his dark eyes reflecting the porch light with an intelligence that no longer seemed mysterious. Jake's wife had trained there, a dog to find minerals, but she had also trained Jake, through her journal, her dreams, and her unshakable belief in community, to find the courage to honor both her vision and their family's legacy. Tomorrow he would call Titan Mining and officially reject their offer. Then the real work would begin. The call to Titan Mining was scheduled for Tuesday morning, but Monday evening brought an unexpected visitor that changed everything Jake thought he understood about his situation. Margaret Foster arrived at his door carrying a manila envelope and wearing the expression of someone who had uncovered something significant. Jake, I've been researching your property's history for the community development proposal, and I found something you need to see immediately. She spread documents across his kitchen table, copies of geological survey reports, land transfer records, and correspondence dating back 30 years. There was a comprehensive mineral survey conducted on your property in 1994, commissioned by the State Geological Survey. Someone knew exactly what was under your land. Jake studied the official reports, recognizing formations and mineral descriptions that matched what Sarah Chen had found. Who ordered this survey? That's where it gets interesting. Margaret pulled out a letter with familiar letterhead. Your father-in-law, Robert Martinez, requested the survey as part of a potential mining lease agreement. He knew about the mineral deposits when he transferred the property to you and Maria. The revelation hit Jake like cold water. Maria's father had been a quiet man, a retired Forest Service worker who had always claimed the family land was valuable only for its natural beauty and privacy. He had never mentioned geological surveys or mineral potential when he signed the property over to Jake and Maria as a wedding gift. There's more, Margaret continued, producing additional correspondence. Robert Martinez was approached by several mining companies in the 1990s, including an early version of what's now Titan Mining. He turned down all offers and specifically structured the property transfer to ensure mineral rights couldn't be sold without unanimous consent from both you and Maria. Jake felt his understanding of the past 2 decades shifting like unstable ground. So he protected the minerals intentionally. He did more than that. Margaret pulled out the most stunning document, a handwritten letter addressed to Maria, dated just before her cancer diagnosis. I found this in the county clerk's files, attached to your property deed. It was meant to be delivered to you after both Robert and Maria had passed away. Jake's hands shook as he read his father-in-law's words. Maria, if you're reading this, it means the time has come for you and Jake to understand the responsibility we've placed on your shoulders. The land holds enough mineral wealth to transform not just your family's circumstances, but the entire Cedar Falls community. I've spent 20 years protecting this resource from companies that would exploit it purely for profit. The geological survey confirmed what my grandfather suspected. The mineral formations extend throughout the entire watershed, potentially affecting thousands of acres beyond your property. Corporate extraction would destroy the environmental balance that makes this land special, but sustainable community-controlled development could provide prosperity while preserving what we love about this place. I've been training Scout to recognize the mineral signatures, hoping that someday he could guide you to the surface formations that would prove what lies beneath. Use this discovery wisely. Use it to honor the land and the community that has been our family for generations. Jake set the letter down, his mind reeling. Scout's behavior hadn't been mysterious or accidental. It had been the culmination of a carefully planned strategy involving 3 generations of his family. His father-in-law had protected valuable resources for decades. Maria had researched sustainable development methods, and together they had prepared for a future they might not live to see. "There's one more thing," Margaret said gently. "The survey indicates that the mineral formations extend well beyond your property boundaries. Robert Martinez owned additional land that he transferred to the Nature Conservancy before his death, specifically to prevent mining companies from accessing the deposits through adjacent properties." Jake stared at the survey maps, seeing highlighted areas that covered thousands of acres surrounding his homestead. "So the entire mineral deposit is protected and controlled by your family's decisions over 3 decades. Robert Martinez essentially created a situation where sustainable extraction could happen only with community cooperation, exactly what Maria envisioned in her journal. The implications were staggering. Jake wasn't just inheriting mineral rights, he was inheriting responsibility for managing a resource that could transform the entire region. The decisions he made wouldn't just affect his family's future. They would determine the economic and environmental future of everyone in Cedar Falls. That evening, Jake called Dr. Sarah Chen with the new information. Her reaction confirmed his growing understanding of the situation's magnitude. "Jake, this changes the scope of everything we've been discussing. We're not talking about a single property, mineral deposit. We're talking about a regionally significant formation that could supply rare earth minerals for decades." "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means you're not just a landowner who made a lucky discovery. You're the steward of a resource that could affect national strategic mineral supplies. The federal government will have opinions about how this should be developed. Environmental groups will have opinions, and mining corporations will increase pressure significantly once they understand the true scope of what you control." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. "Sarah, I need to understand something. If I pursue community-controlled development, do we actually have the expertise to manage something this significant? With the right partnerships, absolutely. But Jake, you need to understand that once this information becomes public, you'll be dealing with pressures from entities much larger and more powerful than Titan Mining. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny and conflict?" That night, Jake sat on his porch with Scout and Maria's journal, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd inherited. His family hadn't just owned land, they had been guardians of a resource that powerful interests had been seeking for decades. Scout seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. The dog sat alert and watchful, his attention focused on the woods that held secrets 3 generations in the making. In the darkness beyond the porch light, Jake could almost feel the presence of Maria and her father, their planning and protection extending from beyond the grave to shape this crucial moment. The phone rang at exactly 10 p.m. Tom Brennan with news that confirmed Jake's fears about escalating pressure. "Jake, I just got a call from my supervisor. Word is spreading through corporate networks that you're sitting on something much bigger than anyone initially realized. Titan Mining isn't the only company that's going to come knocking." "How much bigger, Tom?" "Big enough that my company's parent corporation is asking questions about mineral rights and community development opportunities in Cedar Falls. Big enough that federal agencies are starting to take notice." Jake closed his eyes, understanding that his quiet life was about to become exponentially more complicated. "Tom, I need your honest opinion. Am I crazy to think we can manage community-controlled development of something this significant?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. 6 months ago, I would have said yes, but watching you organize community support, seeing the planning Maria and her father put into protecting this resource, I think maybe they knew you were the right person to handle something this important." After Tom hung up, Jake remained on the porch with Scout, staring at the rock collection that had started everything. Each stone now represented not just geological formations, but decades of family planning and community responsibility. Tomorrow, he would reject Titan Mining's offer as planned. But now he understood that his decision would trigger consequences extending far beyond Cedar Falls, involving interests and pressures he was only beginning to comprehend. The question was no longer whether he could honor Maria's vision for community development. The question was whether he could navigate the complex forces that would try to prevent him from succeeding. Jake's call to Titan Mining Tuesday morning lasted exactly 47 seconds. "Mr. Steele, this is Jake Harmon. I'm calling to formally reject your offer for mineral rights to my property." Robert Steele's response carried none of his previous smoothness. "Mr. Harmon, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Rejecting our offer could lead to complications you're not prepared to handle." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Steele?" "I'm advising you that independent mineral development involves risks and challenges that individual landowners typically can't manage successfully." Jake thought about his father-in-law's letter, Maria's journal, and 3 generations of careful planning. "I'll take my chances." "This conversation isn't over, Mr. Harmon." The line went dead, leaving Jake with the unsettling certainty that Titan Mining's tactics were about to escalate significantly. By noon, those tactics had become clear. Patricia Reeves called with news that Titan Mining had filed a lawsuit challenging Jake's mineral rights, claiming irregularities in the property transfers dating back to his grandfather's original purchase. "It's a nuisance suit designed to freeze your assets and force you into expensive litigation," Patricia explained. "Even though they have no legitimate claim, they can tie up your property rights for years while they pressure you to settle." "How do we fight it? With more resources than you currently have." "Jake, this is exactly what I warned you about. They're using the legal system as a weapon, betting you can't afford to defend yourself properly." That afternoon brought worse news. Dr. Sarah Chen called to report that federal agencies were beginning to take interest in the mineral discovery, potentially classifying certain rare earth elements as strategically important to national security. "What does that mean for community development?" Jake asked. "It means you could face federal intervention if the government decides these minerals are too important for local control. There's legal precedent for federal acquisition of strategic mineral deposits through eminent domain." Jake felt the walls closing in around his family's plans. After decades of protection and preparation, external forces were mobilizing to prevent exactly the kind of community-controlled development Maria and her father had envisioned. That evening, Mayor Barbara Chen arrived with a petition signed by 67 Cedar Falls residents supporting Jake's community development proposal. "Jake, people are talking. Word is getting out about what you're trying to accomplish, and the community is rallying behind you." The petition represented more than signatures. It represented teachers willing to organize educational programs around sustainable mining, business owners planning services for the workers a local operation would employ, and families hoping their children might find reasons to stay in Cedar Falls instead of leaving for opportunities elsewhere. "There's something else," Mayor Chen continued. "I've been in contact with the Montana Community Development Corporation. They're willing to provide technical assistance and grant funding for projects like what you're proposing." Jake felt a spark of hope. What kind of assistance? Legal support, environmental consulting, business development resources, basically everything you'd need to structure community-controlled mineral extraction properly. But Jake, there's a catch. They need commitment from you within 2 weeks before federal intervention becomes a possibility. Wednesday brought the first direct threat to Lila's safety. Jake discovered a man in a dark sedan parked near the school bus stop, photographing children as they waited for morning pickup. When Jake confronted him, the man claimed to be conducting a safety assessment for concerned parents worried about the disruption the mineral discovery might bring to the community. "If you're within 100 yards of my daughter again, we're going to have a serious problem," Jake told the man, his voice carrying the kind of quiet intensity that made Scout's hackles rise. The man drove away, but his message had been clear. Jake's decisions could have consequences that extended to his family's physical safety. That afternoon, Jake made 2 calls that would define the next phase of his battle. The first was to Tom Brennan. "Tom, I need you to take some vacation time. Things are getting serious and I need someone I trust watching my back." "Already done. I called in sick for the rest of the week." "Jenny understands. She says Maria would haunt us both if we let corporate bullies push you around." The second call was to Dr. Sarah Chen. "Sarah, I need to know, if we move fast, can community-controlled development actually work? Or am I putting my family at risk for something that's impossible to achieve?" Jake, "I've been researching similar projects around the world. With proper planning and community support, sustainable extraction not only works, it often generates more long-term revenue than corporate extraction while providing better environmental protection." Her voice carried conviction born of scientific analysis. "The question isn't whether it can work. The question is whether you can navigate the obstacles powerful interests will place in your path." Thursday brought the community meeting that would determine everything. Jake had reserved the Cedar Falls Community Center, a building that desperately needed the renovations Maria had dreamed about, for an evening presentation of his development proposal. 63 people showed up, representing nearly every family in town. They filled folding chairs borrowed from 3 different churches, creating an atmosphere that felt part town hall meeting, part family reunion. Jake stood at the front of the room, looking at faces he'd known all his life. Neighbors who had brought casseroles after Maria's funeral, business owners who had extended credit when his medical bills piled up, teachers who had shown Lila extra kindness during her mother's illness. "Folks, I want to be completely honest about what we're facing," Jake began. "My family has been protecting mineral resources on our property for 30 years, waiting for the right time and the right approach to develop them responsibly. That time has come, but powerful companies want to take control of those resources, away from our community." He explained Titan Mining's pressure tactics, the federal government's growing interest, and the legal challenges that threaten to prevent local control of mineral development. But he also shared Maria's vision, backed by detailed financial projections and environmental protection measures. "This isn't about making my family wealthy," Jake continued. "This is about using resources that have been hidden under our feet for millions of years to build something lasting for our children and grandchildren." Margaret Foster spoke first. "Jake, what do you need from us to make this happen?" "I need commitment. If we're going to pursue community-controlled development, we need people willing to invest time, resources, and energy in making it work. I need business owners willing to adapt to support mining operations. I need families willing to accept the changes that come with new jobs and new residents. Most importantly, I need people willing to stand up to corporations that will try to intimidate us into giving up." Tom Brennan stood up. "I'm in, whatever you need." One by one, other hands went up around the room. Teachers, business owners, retirees, young families, 63 people making a commitment to support community development against corporate pressure. Mayor Chen stood last. "Jake, on behalf of the town council, I can tell you that Cedar Falls officially supports your proposal. We'll provide municipal resources, navigate regulatory requirements, and stand with you against any pressure tactics." As the meeting concluded, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since Maria's death. The strength that comes from community support, from people willing to work together toward shared goals that benefit everyone. But he also felt the weight of responsibility. 63 people were now depending on his ability to navigate pressures and obstacles that would only intensify as Titan Mining and other corporate interests realized they were facing organized community resistance. Friday morning brought the news Jake had been expecting and dreading. Patricia Reeves called with an update on Titan's legal challenges. They've escalated. Titan is now claiming environmental concerns about amateur mining operations, and they've convinced the state regulatory agency to require comprehensive environmental impact studies before any extraction can begin. How long do those studies take? Months, maybe years, depending on how thoroughly they're conducted and how many challenges get filed. Jake, they're using environmental protection as a weapon to prevent the exact kind of sustainable development you're proposing. That afternoon, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived with a folder of documents and an expression of grim determination. Jake, I've been working with colleagues at universities across the country, and we've developed a proposal that might cut through the regulatory delays. She spread blueprints and research papers across his kitchen table. A consortium of academic institutions wants to partner with your community on a research-based extraction project. The proposal involved university funding for environmental studies, academic oversight of extraction methods, and research publication that would establish Cedar Falls as a model for sustainable community-controlled mining. Corporate opponents couldn't easily attack academic research, and federal agencies would be more likely to approve projects backed by multiple universities. How soon could something like this be implemented? Jake asked. With community approval, we could have preliminary studies completed within 60 days, full environmental certification within 6 months. But Jake, this requires your community to commit to academic standards of transparency and environmental protection that go beyond what's legally required. Jake thought about Maria's vision, his father-in-law's decades of protection, and 63 neighbors willing to support sustainable development. Sarah, what we're trying to build here is exactly what academic standards of environmental protection are meant to achieve. That evening, Jake sat on his porch with Scout, watching the sun set over the woods that held his family's future. Tomorrow would bring new pressures, new challenges, new attempts by powerful interests to prevent community-controlled development. But tonight, for the first time since Scout had started bringing home rocks, Jake felt confident that the forces aligned in favor of his family's vision were stronger than the forces trying to prevent it. The real test would come when those opposing forces realized that Jake Harmon was no longer just a struggling single father they could pressure into accepting their terms. He had become something much more dangerous, a community leader with the support and resources to fight for what he believed in. The confrontation Jake had been expecting came Monday morning in the form of 3 black SUVs and a county sheriff's deputy delivering a legal notice. Robert Steele emerged from the lead vehicle accompanied by 2 men in expensive suits and a woman carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Jake's monthly grocery budget. Mr. Harmon, I'm serving you with a temporary restraining order preventing any alteration of your property pending resolution of environmental and mineral rights disputes, the deputy announced, handing Jake official documents that transformed his land into a legal battleground. Steele stepped forward with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way through superior resources. Jake, this doesn't have to be complicated. We're prepared to increase our offer to $15 million, paid immediately upon signing. You could end all this legal uncertainty today. I already gave you my answer, Jake replied, though his stomach clenched as he scanned the legal documents that could prevent him from pursuing community development for months or years. Your answer is putting your family at risk, one of Steele's companions said. Legal battles are expensive, and you're facing opponents with unlimited resources. How much debt are you willing to take on for principles that won't pay your daughter's college expenses? Jake felt heat rising in his chest. Not anger, but the kind of protective determination that had carried him through Maria's illness and the struggles that followed. My daughter's college expenses aren't your concern. They should be yours. Though, the woman with the expensive briefcase added, Mr. Harmon, we've reviewed your financial situation. You're exactly 4 months behind on property taxes. Your credit rating reflects significant medical debt, and your earning capacity has been permanently reduced by your injury. Fighting us will bankrupt you." The words hit their target because everyone was true. Jake's financial vulnerability had been carefully researched and weaponized against him. But as he stood on his porch, with Scout alert beside him and Lila watching from the kitchen window, he remembered his father-in-law's letter and Maria's journal entries about responsibility extending beyond individual comfort. "You're right about my financial situation," Jake admitted, "but you're wrong about my priorities." Tom Brennan's pickup truck appeared on the road, followed by Margaret Foster's sedan and Mayor Chen's official vehicle. Word of the confrontation had apparently spread through Cedar Falls's informal communication network, and Jake's supporters were arriving to witness the corporate pressure tactics firsthand. "Mr. Harmon, you're making this more difficult than necessary," Steele said as more vehicles arrived. "We're offering you financial security your family will never achieve through amateur mining operations." "What you're offering is theft disguised as generosity," Tom Brennan said as he joined the group on Jake's porch. $12 million for mineral rights worth 10 times that amount isn't generous. It's criminal." More community members arrived, transforming the confrontation from private pressure into public theater. Margaret Foster began taking photographs of the corporate representatives, while Mayor Chen documented their statements on her phone's voice recorder. "This is harassment," the woman with the briefcase declared. "Mr. Harmon, these people are putting your family's financial future at risk to pursue their own political agendas." "These people are my neighbors," Jake replied, "and their agenda is making sure Cedar Falls benefits from resources that have been under our feet for generations." Dr. Sarah Chen's Jeep appeared on the road, followed by 2 additional vehicles, carrying people Jake didn't recognize. Sarah emerged from her vehicle with a folder of documents and the kind of purposeful expression that suggested significant developments. "Jake, I have news that changes everything," Sarah announced, ignoring the corporate representatives entirely. "The University Consortium has been approved for federal research grant funding. We have $3.2 million available immediately for environmental studies and sustainable extraction research." The corporate team's confidence visibly wavered. Federal grant funding meant academic oversight, media attention, and governmental support for Jake's community development approach. Their legal tactics worked best against isolated individuals, not against communities backed by university research and federal resources. "Mr. Harmon, federal grants come with restrictions and oversight requirements that will delay any revenue generation for years," Steele warned. "Our offer provides immediate financial benefit without regulatory complications. Your offer provides immediate profit for your company while leaving our community with environmental damage and no long-term benefits," Mayor Chen replied sharply. "We've seen what corporate extraction does to small towns." The 2 strangers who had arrived with Sarah stepped forward, introducing themselves as representatives from the Montana Community Development Corporation and the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Community-Based Resource Management. Their presence indicated that Jake's situation had attracted attention from state and federal agencies supportive of sustainable development. "Mr. Harmon, we're here to discuss technical assistance for community-controlled mineral extraction," the state representative announced. "Your project has been identified as a potential model for sustainable rural economic development." Steele's team began a hurried conference, clearly recognizing that their pressure tactics had backfired by generating exactly the kind of governmental and academic support that would make corporate acquisition more difficult. "This meeting is over," the woman with the briefcase declared. "Mr. Harmon, you have 48 hours to reconsider our offer before we pursue additional legal remedies." "What kind of legal remedies?" Tom Brennan asked. "The kind that ensure responsible development of strategic mineral resources," Steele replied cryptically. After the corporate team departed, Jake found himself surrounded by neighbors, state officials, and academic researchers discussing technical details of sustainable extraction that seemed surreal after 2 years of struggling to pay basic bills. "Jake, I need you to understand what just happened," Sarah explained as the crowd began to disperse. "By rejecting their pressure and demonstrating community support, you've attracted the attention of federal agencies that want to support alternative models of resource development." What does that mean practically? It means you're no longer fighting corporate pressure alone. You have governmental and academic resources backing community-controlled development. Sarah's expression grew serious. But it also means the stakes have increased significantly. If this project succeeds, it becomes a national model. If it fails, it sets back community-based resource management for years. That evening, Jake sat with Lila on their porch, trying to explain the day's events in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "Daddy, are the bad men going to take Scout's rocks away?" "They're going to try, sweetheart. But a lot of good people are helping us keep the rocks here so we can use them to make Cedar Falls a better place. Like Mommy wanted?" "Exactly like Mommy wanted." Lila considered this seriously. "Scout found the rocks for us, didn't he? That means they're supposed to stay here." Jake looked at his daughter's solemn face, seeing Maria's determination reflected in features that would someday carry their family's legacy forward. "You're absolutely right, honey. Scout found them for us, and we're going to make sure they're used the way your mother would have wanted." The phone rang inside. Patricia Reeves with an update on Titan Mining's legal maneuvering that confirmed Jake's growing understanding of the battle ahead. "Jake, they've filed an injunction claiming your community development plans violate federal environmental regulations. It's designed to prevent any progress while they organize additional pressure tactics. Can we fight it?" "With the university consortium backing an EPA support, yes. But Jake, tomorrow's town hall meeting isn't just about community approval anymore. It's about demonstrating to federal judges that your project has legitimate governmental and academic support." Jake hung up the phone, understanding that tomorrow would determine whether 3 generations of his family's planning would result in community prosperity or corporate acquisition disguised as legal necessity. Tuesday's town hall meeting filled the Cedar Falls Community Center beyond capacity, with standing room only, and people gathered outside to listen through open windows. Local residents sat alongside state officials, university researchers, environmental activists, and corporate representatives in an atmosphere charged with the knowledge that decisions made tonight would affect the community for generations. Jake stood at the front of the room, looking out at faces that represented every aspect of his life. Neighbors who had supported his family through difficult times, officials who could provide resources for community development, and corporate representatives whose presence carried an implicit threat. Mayor Chen called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m., her voice carrying the authority of someone who understood the historical significance of the moment. "Tonight, we're here to vote on a resolution supporting community-controlled mineral extraction on the Harmon property, with university oversight and environmental protection measures that exceed federal requirements," she announced. "This decision will determine not just our economic future, but the kind of community we want to be." Robert Steele stood up from his seat in the back row, his presence transforming the community meeting into a confrontation between local autonomy and corporate power. "Before any votes are taken, residents should understand the risks they're accepting," Steele announced. "Amateur mining operations face regulatory challenges, environmental liabilities, and market uncertainties that experienced companies can manage more effectively." Margaret Foster responded immediately. "Mr. Steele, what you call amateur operations, we call community ownership. What you call regulatory challenges, we call environmental protection. And what you call market uncertainties, we call keeping profits local instead of shipping them to corporate headquarters in other states." Dr. Sarah Chen stood up, carrying a folder of research documents. I'd like to present the University Consortium's Environmental and Economic Analysis of Community-Controlled Extraction versus Corporate Mining. Her presentation detailed sustainable extraction methods that would provide local jobs, generate revenue for community projects, and protect environmental resources more effectively than traditional corporate mining. The academic backing gave weight to arguments that corporate representatives couldn't easily dismiss. Community-controlled operations typically generate 3 times more local economic benefit per dollar of extracted minerals, Sarah explained. Corporate extraction maximizes short-term profits for shareholders while externalizing environmental and social costs to local communities. A man Jake didn't recognize stood up from the section where corporate representatives were seated. "I'm James Morrison from the Montana Mining Association. Community operations lack the capital resources and technical expertise for large-scale mineral extraction. This project will fail, leaving Cedar Falls with environmental damage and no economic benefits." Tom Brennan rose from his seat. "Mr. Morrison, I've worked in resource extraction for 15 years. Community operations with proper oversight and university partnerships often outperform corporate projects in both environmental protection and long-term economic sustainability." The debate continued for over an hour, with corporate representatives emphasizing risks and complications, while community members focused on local control and sustainable development. But the decisive moment came when Lila Harmon asked to speak. 8-year-old Lila walked to the front of the room with the serious demeanor she brought to important occasions, looking out at the packed community center with her mother's quiet. "In confidence, my name is Lila Harmon and Scout is my dog," she began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the room. "He found rocks because my mommy trained him to help our family and our town when the time was right." She paused, looking directly at the corporate representatives in the back row. "The men in the fancy cars want to take Scout's rocks and use them to make money for people who don't live here. But my daddy wants to use them to build the community center my mommy always dreamed about and to make jobs so kids like me don't have to leave Cedar Falls when we grow up." Her words carried the emotional weight of personal loss and family legacy that no corporate presentation could match. "Scout didn't find those rocks for strangers. He found them for us, for our neighbors, for our home." When Lila returned to her seat, the room was completely silent. Even the corporate representatives seemed affected by the child's simple articulation of what was at stake. Mayor Chen called for the vote. "All in favor of Resolution 2024-7, supporting community-controlled mineral extraction with university oversight and enhanced environmental protection measures." Hands went up throughout the room, not just from long-time residents, but from recent arrivals, business owners, and even some people Jake didn't recognize as Cedar Falls residents. All opposed? 3 hands went up, all from the corporate representatives. "Section: The resolution passes unanimously among Cedar Falls residents," Mayor Chen announced. "Mr. Harmon, you have our community's full support for sustainable mineral extraction that benefits our town and honors your family's vision." After the formal vote, people lingered to discuss implementation details, volunteer for various committees, and commit resources to support the project. The atmosphere shifted from confrontational to collaborative, with neighbors planning how to make Maria's dreams reality. Dr. Sarah Chen approached Jake with final paperwork for the University Consortium partnership. "Jake, with tonight's community approval, we can begin environmental studies immediately. Federal grant funding will be available within 30 days. How long before actual extraction can begin?" Jake asked. 6 months for full environmental certification, maybe 8. But Jake, you need to understand, tonight's vote doesn't end corporate pressure. If anything, it will intensify their efforts to prevent your success. Robert Steele confirmed Sarah's warning as he prepared to leave. "Mr. Harmon, you've made a serious mistake. Community operations face challenges you're not prepared for. When this project fails, and it will fail, Remember that we offered you a guaranteed alternative. Mr. Steele, when this project succeeds, remember that you had the opportunity to support community development instead of trying to prevent it, Jake replied. As the crowd dispersed, Jake found himself standing in the empty community center with Lila, Tom, and Margaret, looking at the space that would soon be renovated with revenue from sustainable mineral extraction. Your mother would be proud, Margaret said softly, not just of what you're accomplishing, but of how you're honoring her vision while building something even bigger than she imagined. Jake looked down at Lila, who was sketching plans for community center improvements on the back of her school notebook. What do you think, kiddo? Are we doing this right? Mommy always said the best things happen when neighbors help neighbors, Lila replied without looking up from her drawing. Tonight felt like that. Outside, Scout was waiting patiently beside Jake's truck, having somehow understood that his humans were engaged in important work related to the rocks he'd been collecting for months. The dog's tail wagged as they approached, his dark eyes reflecting streetlights with an intelligence that no longer surprised Jake. You did good work tonight, boy, Jake said, scratching Scout's ears. Your rocks are going to help build something special. As they drove home through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, Jake felt a sense of completion that had been absent since Maria's death. His family's three-generation plan was finally becoming reality, with community support, governmental backing, and the resources needed to honor both his late wife's dreams and his daughter's future. But he also understood that tonight's victory was only the beginning. Corporate interests wouldn't accept defeat easily, and the real test would come in the months ahead as they worked to transform community approval into sustainable mineral extraction that could serve as a model for rural economic development. 6 months later, Jake stood in the same spot on his porch where Scout had deposited that first muddy rock, watching construction crews install equipment for the Cedar Falls Community Mining Cooperative. The sustainable extraction facility looked nothing like the industrial complexes corporate mining companies typically built. Solar panels powered the operations, water recycling systems protected local streams, and the entire facility was designed to blend with the natural landscape that had attracted his family to this land 3 generations ago. The legal battles with Titan Mining had ended 2 months earlier, when federal environmental reviews confirmed that community-controlled extraction with university oversight provided superior environmental protection compared to corporate alternatives. The mining company's final lawsuit challenging Jake's mineral rights had been dismissed with prejudice, and their representatives had stopped visiting Cedar Falls entirely. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged from the facility's monitoring station carrying the daily environmental report that documented the operation's impact on air quality, water systems, and wildlife habitats. The University Consortium's research had attracted international attention, with delegations from 3 different countries visiting to study community-controlled mineral extraction as a model for sustainable rural development. Jake, today's mineral yield exceeded projections again, Sarah announced, showing him production figures that still seemed surreal. We're on track to generate $4.2 million in community revenue this year, with increasing yields as extraction methods become more efficient. The numbers represented transformation beyond anything Jake had imagined when Scout first started bringing home mysterious rocks. The Cedar Falls Community Development Fund now had resources to renovate the community center, expand the school's science programs, and provide college scholarships for local students. Tom Brennan's renewable energy project had attracted additional federal funding, making Cedar Falls one of the first energy-independent rural communities in Montana. There's more good news, Sarah continued. The EPA has approved our application to expand sustainable extraction to the Nature Conservancy land your father-in-law protected. Community revenue could double within 2 years. Jake looked toward the woods where Scout had made his original discoveries, seeing survey markers that indicated additional mineral formations extending throughout the protected watershed. His father-in-law's decades of planning had created opportunities that would benefit Cedar Falls for generations. Lila appeared from around the corner of the house, wearing the safety vest she'd insisted on getting so she could visit the extraction facility like the adult workers. At 8 years old, she had become the operation's unofficial mascot, asking questions that sometimes stumped university researchers and drawing detailed pictures of mining equipment that decorated the facility's break room. "Daddy, Mr. Brennan says the new community center will have a science lab where kids can study rocks like scouts," she announced. "Can I help design it?" "I think that's exactly what your mother would have wanted," Jake replied, remembering Maria's journal entries about educational opportunities that could keep young people in Cedar Falls instead of forcing them to leave for better prospects elsewhere. Mayor Chen's official vehicle pulled into the driveway, followed by a van from the Montana Public Television Network. The state had commissioned a documentary about community-controlled mineral extraction, with Cedar Falls serving as the primary example of successful rural economic development. "Jake, we have visitors from Washington," Mayor Chen announced as she approached the porch. "Representatives from the Department of Interior want to discuss expanding the Cedar Falls model to other rural communities with mineral resources." The federal attention represented validation of everything Jake's family had worked toward, but it also brought responsibilities he was still learning to handle. Speaking at conferences, consulting with other communities, and serving as a spokesperson for sustainable development had transformed his life in ways that extended far beyond financial security. Margaret Foster joined the group, carrying copies of the latest economic impact study that documented Cedar Falls' transformation. Property values had increased by 40%, unemployment had dropped to near zero, and the town's population had grown for the first time in 2 decades as young families moved to the area for jobs in sustainable mining and renewable energy. "Jake, I have something for you," Margaret said, producing a letter with familiar handwriting. "I found this in Maria's papers at the library. Apparently she left it there for safekeeping with instructions to deliver it after the community development and project became successful." Jake's hands shook as he read his late wife's final message. "My dearest Jake, if you're reading this, it means Scout found the rocks and you found the courage to honor our family's responsibility to the land and the community. I always knew you were stronger than you believed, more capable than you realized, and wiser than you gave yourself credit for. The minerals were never about making our family wealthy. They were about proving that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together towards shared goals that benefit everyone. You've honored not just my dreams, but the dreams of everyone who believes Cedar Falls could be something special again. Take care of our daughter, take care of our community, and take care of Scout. He's earned his place in family history alongside the humans who helped make this possible. I love you both more than all the minerals in all the mountains." Jake wiped his eyes, understanding that Maria's final message was both conclusion and benediction, acknowledgement that their family's 3-generation plan had succeeded beyond their most ambitious hopes. That evening, Jake sat on his porch with Lila and Scout, watching the sun set over the Cedar Falls Community Mining Cooperative while the sounds of a thriving town drifted from the revitalized downtown area. The community center's construction lights were visible through the trees, and the cheerful noise of children playing at the expanded playground created a soundtrack of prosperity and hope. "Daddy, do you think Mommy can see what we built?" Lila asked, leaning against his good shoulder. "I think she can see it, and I think she's proud of how you helped make it happen," Jake replied. "You and Scout both." Scout's tail thumped against the porch boards as if he understood the conversation's significance. The dog had retired from active rock collecting once the extraction facility began operations, but he still made daily patrols of the property with the satisfied air of someone whose work had been completed successfully. The phone rang inside. Probably another interview request or consulting opportunity, but Jake let it go to voicemail. Tonight was for family, for reflection, and for gratitude that sometimes life's most devastating challenges could transform into its most meaningful opportunities. In the distance, the lights of the extraction facility glowed like stars against the mountainside, powered by renewable energy and operated according to environmental standards that had attracted worldwide attention. The facility would provide jobs and revenue for decades, but more importantly, it represented proof that communities could control their own economic destiny when neighbors worked together toward shared goals. Jake thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Scouts' mysterious rock-collecting behavior, the discovery of minerals worth millions, the pressure from corporate interests, and the community mobilization that had made sustainable development possible. Every challenge had been preparation for the next phase. Every setback had strengthened their resolve, and every small victory had built toward something larger than any of them had imagined possible. "Are you ready to go inside, kiddo?" Jake asked, as Lila began yawning against his shoulder. "Can we stay out here a little longer? I like listening to the town sounds." Jake smiled, understanding that his daughter was absorbing the audio evidence of community prosperity. Car doors closing as people returned from evening shifts, voices carrying from the renovated downtown area, and the general bustle of a place where people had reasons to be optimistic about the future. "A few more minutes," he agreed, pulling her closer and watching Scout's contented surveillance of their property. The man who had once worried about losing his family's land to unpaid taxes now found himself stewarding resources that would benefit multiple generations of Cedar Falls residents. The father who had struggled to provide basic security for his daughter had helped create opportunities that would allow her to choose her own path without financial constraints. Most importantly, the widower who had felt disconnected from his late wife's dreams had honored her vision in ways that exceeded her most ambitious plans. Maria's journal had provided the blueprint, her father's protection had preserved the resources, and Scout's trained behavior had revealed the possibilities at exactly the right moment. As the stars appeared over the Montana mountains, Jake understood that his family's story had become part of Cedar Falls' history, and Cedar Falls' success would inspire other communities facing similar challenges. The rocks Scout had collected weren't just minerals. They were building blocks for the kind of rural prosperity that proved small towns could thrive when residents worked together toward shared goals. The future stretched ahead with possibilities. Jake was still learning to envision, but tonight was perfect exactly as it was. Father and daughter on their family's porch, watching over a community that had flourished because a loyal dog had known exactly where to look for buried treasure.